It was a beautiful autumn day when I set out for my hike in the woods. The crisp air and the sound of leaves rustling under my feet were invigorating. I felt alive and free. However, as I hiked deeper into the woods, the trees became denser and the light grew dimmer. I suddenly realized I had lost my way. I tried retracing my steps, but everything looked the same. The trees seemed to have twisted and turned, and the path that had seemed so clear before now looked entirely different. I was lost. As the sun began to set, I knew I had to find shelter for the night. I spotted a small cabin up ahead and hoped that someone was home. As I approached the door, I heard a faint whisper. It sounded like a chant or a spell. I hesitated for a moment, but the sound of the whispering grew louder, and I knew I had to investigate. I pushed the door open and found myself in a small, dimly lit room. In the center of the room, an old woman sat, surrounded by candles and strange objects. She looked up at me, and her eyes seemed to glow in the flickering candlelight. "Who are you?" she asked in a raspy voice. "I'm lost," I said. "I need a place to stay for the night." The old woman looked at me for a moment, and then she nodded. "You can stay here," she said. "But be warned, this is not a safe place. There are things in these woods that you do not want to encounter." I thanked her and settled into a corner of the room, trying to make myself as comfortable as possible. As I tried to sleep, I heard strange noises outside the cabin. It sounded like animals, but they didn't sound like any animal I had ever heard before. As the night wore on, the noises grew louder, and I felt a growing sense of unease. I tried to convince myself that it was just my imagination, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. In the morning, I thanked the old woman and set out to find my way back to civilization. As I hiked through the woods, I felt like I was being followed. Every time I turned around, I saw nothing, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was there. As the sun began to set, I spotted a clearing up ahead. As I approached, I saw a group of people gathered around a bonfire. They were chanting and dancing around the flames, and I felt like I had stumbled upon some kind of ritual. But as I got closer, I realized that these were not ordinary people. They had strange markings on their skin, and their eyes glowed in the firelight. And then, I saw her. The old woman from the cabin was there, and she was leading the ritual. I tried to back away, but it was too late. They had seen me. The old woman approached me, and I could feel her breath on my neck. "Welcome to our coven," she said. I tried to run, but I was surrounded. They captured me and brought me back to their secret coven. It was a large stone circle deep in the woods. The stones were covered in strange symbols and carvings, and the air around the circle was thick with an otherworldly energy. The old woman placed me in the center of the circle and began to chant. As she chanted, the other members of the coven began to circle around me, their eyes glowing in the moonlight. I felt a rush of fear and adrenaline as I realized that I was in the midst of something truly dangerous. Suddenly, the chanting stopped, and the old woman turned to me. "You have trespassed on our land," she said. "You have seen too much. We cannot allow you to leave here alive." I tried to plead for my life, but it was no use. The coven began to close in on me, and I knew that this was the end. But just as they were about to strike, there was a blinding flash of light, and everything went dark. When I opened my eyes, I was lying on the ground, alone in the stone circle. The coven and the old woman were nowhere to be seen, and the woods were silent. I stumbled to my feet, my mind reeling with confusion and fear. As I made my way back to civilization, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still following me. Every time I turned around, I saw nothing, but I knew that something was there, just beyond my line of sight. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months, but I could never shake the feeling that I was being watched. I tried to convince myself that it was just my imagination, but I knew that something had changed in me. Something that I couldn't quite explain. Years went by, and I tried to forget about the witch in the woods, but I couldn't. The memory of that night stayed with me, haunting me in my dreams and in the quiet moments of my life. And then, one day, I received a package in the mail. It was a small wooden box, with strange symbols carved into the lid. Inside, I found a note and a small vial of liquid. The note read, "You have been marked by the coven. You are now one of us. Drink this potion and embrace your true nature." I hesitated for a moment, but the pull of the coven was too strong. I opened the vial and drank the liquid. And as the potion coursed through my veins, I felt a rush of power and energy that I had never felt before. In that moment, I knew that I was no longer just a mortal. I was something else entirely. And as I looked out into the world, I knew that there were others like me, others who had been touched by the witch in the woods. And I knew that we would always be connected, bound together by the secrets that we shared.